And we are back at the Paragon Games Sapphire Open Top 8. The first round of the top 8 here, we have Rory Bolt on Storm and Lachlan Saunders on Dredge. So we'll just give the notice down to the floor that we're good to go.
So these guys are both playing very powerful combo decks that utilize very different metrics of success. Rory, playing Storm, is looking to cast as many spells in one turn as possible and then finish it off with a lethal grape shot. Whereas Lachlan is using his graveyard as a resource, all of his powerful dredge cards, filling it up and letting him enable a really powerful recursion engine.
Okay.
So at least in game run, both of these players are going to be trying to get their strategy as up and running as quickly as possible.
Okay. So are these decks ones that interact with each other very much?
Very little.
Okay. So we might be seeing these players sort of goldfishing a bit on
a little bit.
both sides. Yeah.
It does. Interestingly enough, Lachlan has got a few tools that he can use depending on the kill that Rory goes for. As well as Grape Shot, the Storm deck uses empty the Warrens as one of its win conditions. And sometimes Lachlan will be able to clear away a lot of those Goblin tokens with Conflagrate. Just a little bit frozen, as we've had a couple of times before. Bear with us.
Should be sorting itself out soon.
I'm sure there's some very interesting magic going on, and
we'll try to get a bit of an update from the floor. There we go. Okay, we're back.
So Rory is resolving a Searing Visions at the moment, which is one of his many cantrips. The Storm deck is interested in playing as many of those cards as possible, both to assemble a critical density of spell for the crucial turn, and also to enable Pyromancer's Ascension, which is one of its main engine pieces. That enchantment checks your graveyard for spells that you've cast copies of already, and once it has 2 counters on it, starts copying all the spells you play. And when you're casting cantrips for 1 mana and drawing 2 cards and scrying 4 with the Serum Visions, you can very quickly assemble a density of rituals, more cantrips, and suddenly you have cast 20 spells in a turn, and the game is over. But Lockie is starting pretty strong with 5 power in play on turn 2.
Okay.
There's the Pyromancer's Ascension that we were talking about.
Okay, and this Dredge deck is the one that has benefited from quite a few recently printed cards.
Definitely. The main one being Prized Amalgam, which removed a lot of the clunkiness of the deck and allows it to very quickly apply pressure from the graveyard. Prized Amalgam, of course, whenever a creature enters play from the graveyard, gets to come back tapped at the end of the turn.
Okay.
So as we can see, Lockie is tearing through his deck with these Dredge cards, and just added an additional 5 power to the board.
At very low cost, yeah. Sorry, go on.
Turns out that the Dredge deck is very explosive.
Okay. Yeah, we saw even at the last open the sort of power that Price Amalgam can bring to a deck of Magic, and this is one that definitely can exploit that ability.
Yeah, in Standard, it's utilizing Haunted Dead to come back, and while Lockie does have a copy of that in his deck, he also has Bloodghasts and Narcomoebas who do it for free.
Very nice. Okay.
So Rory has put the first counter on his Pyromancer's Ascension by casting the second Serum Visions. It's unlikely that he'll be able to really make much headway with this enchantment this turn, but if he's able to set it up so that the turn after, he could suddenly sweep this game right out from Lockie's hands.
Okay.
Even though it looks like Lachlan has a very dominant board position, the Storm deck is a spell-based combo. It doesn't need creatures in play if it wants to suddenly win the game.
Okay, and that's sleight of hand, I believe.
Yeah, it is sleight of hand.
Yep.
Not the most impressive cantrip the world's ever seen, but the Storm deck will take basically anything that's respectable, and that's a word you can use to describe a sleight of hand. But Rory doesn't have much time.
He doesn't.
Lachlan is representing 9 points of damage, and if he is able to find a conflagrate somehow, he could just end the game by discarding his hand. And even while not threatening to kill this turn, Rory is on 4 life. Good 4 turns of magic so far.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there is a conflagrate. So the main mode that I think players will be casting this for in this deck will be the flashback mode.
Certainly.
Yeah.
The Dredge deck doesn't make spectacular amounts of mana in comparison to any of the more mana-based strategies in Modern, but it does have a good time discarding cards.
Mm-hmm.
So it is very much interested in that activity.
Okay. What have we just seen happen here?
It seems like Lachlan might have just cast Collective Brutality, which allowed him to discard that Golgari Grave Troll, and he's used the duress mode on that card to go find the most fragile piece in Rory's hand and snatch it away.
So he's taken another sleight of hand.
Yeah, by the looks of things, which is a bit of a disaster for Rory, because those 3 copies of Manamorphose that he had, when combined with an active Pyromancer's Ascension, generate 2 mana and draw 2 cards on every cast, which very, very quickly allows him to run away with the game. So losing that sleight of hand means that he's going to have to use 2 of them just to turn on this Pyromancer's Ascension. He's pulled out the helpful aids to track Storm and Mana. As you can see, we have an Island, a Mountain, and a Stormcrow. Rory is definitely locked in to winning the game this turn or not winning it at all.
Okay. So he's tapped out. He needs to find...
Yeah, but luckily for him, he has a large number of ritual effects. Manamorphose is mana neutral, so every time he casts it, it's going to have the same output that it did last time. But he also plays Pyretic Ritual and Desperate Ritual, both of which net a red mana on their cast. But when you're doubling them, you're netting quite a bit more than that, getting 4 mana out of every ritual.
Okay, so he has the Ascension on now.
He does.
Yeah.
So from now on, every spell he casts is going to get copied. And as you can see, he's using a Pyretic Ritual to make 6 red mana. So it seems like he's just having a bit of a think about his sequencing, casting the Manamorphose next.
Okay, so the goal at this point for Rory is to get his Storm count high enough to kill Lachlan, is that right?
And at the moment, if he's, it looks most likely that Grape Shot is what he's going to want to use to end this game. So he needs to get a Storm count of 16.
16.
And,
Okay.
and every spell that the Pyromancer's Ascension is making does not contribute to that Storm count. Those
Okay.
copies are not being cast, and so he has just added another engine piece to the battlefield with his Goblin Electromancer. It has quite an impact on the effectiveness of the rituals, as all of his spells now cost 1 colorless mana, well, 1 generic mana less.
Okay, so he's just creating a large mana advantage for himself
Yeah,
as he goes.
and this is the main way that the Storm deck can afford to cast so many spells. But it's starting to look a little bit dire for Rory. He's playing out all these engine pieces, but he's not drawing more cards. And shockingly, he doesn't have 16 cards in hand. And as he reveals,
He doesn't have anything
he
else.
just
there.
had
Okay.
mana.
Okay.
There was no business, just gas.
Okay. All right. Well, first game going to Lachlan Saunders on Dredge. So sideboards.
Yeah.
Do we have options?
Well, the Storm deck is able to sideboard, but it probably doesn't want to very much. It is oiled, perhaps not well oiled, as it is a little bit clunky, but it is a machine that really requires a lot of these pieces. And unfortunately for Rory, he doesn't actually have that many good options to bring in for this graveyard-focused deck. His sideboard consists mostly of ways of beating the more grindy nickel and dime strategies of Modern. The blue-white control decks, the Jund. So you can see that from like these Blood Moons, Things in the Ice, Karanos, Empty the Warrens.
Okay.
All of them allow him to have a little bit more reach. The defense grids, Echoing Truths, Recalls, Lightning Bolts are all tools that he uses to remove troublesome permanents that stop him from generating a storm.
Okay.
None of those things are really relevant in the Dredge matchup. Bringing in a Lightning Bolt or a Karanos or even a Blood Moon is going to do him very, very little good when his opponent is applying immediate and large amounts of pressure. So I wouldn't be shocked if he didn't sideboard at all.
Okay.
One thing that he could bring in is the Aetherflux Reservoir, a new card from Kaladesh. And it interacts in a very favourable way with his general game plan, as it checks every time you cast a spell and gains life, and it gains additional life every time you cast an additional spell. So like the Storm mechanic, Aetherflux Reservoir is going to gain you larger and larger amounts of life the more times you cast a spell in a turn.
Okay. And in a matchup where Lachlan is putting a lot of pressure on Rory, would it make sense, do you think, to bring a card like that in?
Definitely makes sense.
Okay.
Trying to use this alternate strategy of gaining so much life so quickly and outrunning the damage that Lachlan is bringing to the table with his Dredge deck is a viable option. But it's also not without its risks. It is a bit of a clunky artifact that doesn't help with the main plan. So he might elect to just try with his starting 60.
Okay. And moving on to Lachlan.
So Lachlan does have some very powerful options in his sideboard. The most key of which is Leyline of the Void. The Storm deck uses its graveyard to win the game using Past in Flames as well as Pyromancer's Ascension. If Lachlan starts for Leyline of the Void in play, both of those otherwise potentially game-winning spells has no text. Also, those Gnaw to the Bones are a pretty relevant option for him, as the Storm deck needs to deal a damage per life, and Gnaw to the Bone can gain a lot of life at instant speed. And with Flashback, it doesn't matter if you can put it into your graveyard using your Dredge cards, you can still cast it. And that could make Rory's life very, very difficult.
Okay. So a couple of cards that Lachlan does have that he will probably be bringing in. I think the players look like they're just about ready to start. They're just shuffling up, so we'll just jump back over there. Okay.
Something that seems very important in this matchup is who is on the play and who is on the draw. Since both of these players are using incredibly powerful non-interactive strategies, the ability to get a turn ahead of the opponent is so significant.
Right. Okay, Rory, nothing to do on turn one.
Lachlan has started again with Insolent Neonate, which can represent some very, very powerful starts. Discarding a Golgari Grave Troll and dredging can set him up for attacking on turn 3 for oodles and oodles of damage.
Okay. Let's see what Rory has to do on turn 2 here.
So it looks like Rory's drawn a sleight of hand. So even though he didn't have any action on turn 1, he's brought in Thing in the Ice, which is not unreasonable. Thing in the Ice is an 0/4 defender, but every time he casts a spell, it removes one of the 4 ice counters that it enters with. And once all those ice counters are gone, the thing in the ice falls out and releases the Awoken Horror. And when it flips over, Awoken Horror is going to put all creatures on the battlefield that are not horrors back in their owner's hand.
And that would be a pretty big blow to Lachlan's deck, would it not?
Definitely. It utilizes the graveyard as its main mechanism of quickly summoning all of its threats. Having them in the hand is actually quite inconvenient. He needs to find a way of putting them back in the graveyard, either his flashing back a Confligate or discarding things to the Collective Brutality as he's casting now.
Okay, so choosing
to escalate it as much as possible, discarding 3 cards here.
Okay, you can't discard 3, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
He is attempting to overpay, but that is not a thing that the game of Magic allows us to do.
So there it is. So he's choosing all the modes. His main goal here, I assume, being to just get cards into the graveyard.
Definitely. He just wants to put as much of that out of there as possible. So Lachlan's chosen the Sleight of Hand again because it gives Rory the most selection out of all of the cantrips in his hand, because obviously every one of those cards draws a card and does a little bit more.
Yep.
And the density of cantrips is really what makes this Storm deck possible. One thing that might have been a consideration for Lachlan is, since all of those spells are instant speed and can trigger the thing from the Ice's flip during Lachlan's turn, seeing that they were all instants might have been a factor in choosing to take the sorcery.
Right.
Because now if Rory wants to cast spells on his own turn, he's sacrificing some of that ability to transform Thing in the Ice mid-combat.
Right. Okay. Cast Thought Scour on himself, I presume.
Which makes sense.
Yep.
Casting Thought Scour on the Dredge opponent is a little risky.
Seems to be, yep.
So Rory's also brought in the Lightning Bolts here.
Okay.
Possibly trying to play a bit more of the control in this matchup, not feeling confident in being able to race the Dredge deck. He is willing to sacrifice some card advantage, and because obviously pointing a Lightning Bolt at a prize amalgam is a little bit of a futile endeavor, it's going to come back eventually. But it's very possible that he is just interested in buying time. Even though it's not the most efficient use of his cards,
Yep.
he thinks that he has the stronger late game.
Okay. So it looks like Rory might have more to do this turn. He has
It seems
an
likely.
untapped land.
Those 2 copies of Manamorphose in his hand are mana neutral. He can cast as many Manamorphoses as he wants per turn. And if he wants to quickly 4 out the thing, which is going to be a little difficult as he missed the
first trigger. Yep.
But he's pulled out the dice and he's
Okay.
pulled out the counters. He might be trying to go off.
Okay.
Which is always something can be a little scary with the Storm deck. It doesn't really need much
Much mana to get there? Yeah.
there. With all these rituals and ways of reusing them with Past in Flames and Pyromancer's Ascension, it doesn't really need as many cards as you'd think.
Right.
But
There is the Ascension.
yeah, it seems that Rory's decided to just put the brakes on
Okay.
and just chill out for a little bit.
Okay. He's got a relatively healthy life total for the time being.
14 is certainly not dead.
Yep.
And that's where he wants to be, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Lachlan has just hit another Narcomoeba, but all of his prize amalgams are already in play. So he's definitely in a situation where he is just too rich. He's already gotten all of his value out of the graveyard.
Yep.
And he'll definitely not get any more value at all. It's all done. Of course, a bit hyperbole. the power of the Dredge deck's graveyard is why that is at the top of the field. And
Yeah, we do have 2 copies of that deck in our top 8. Dennis Mullins, who we had on camera, also playing the deck. So coming in for 8 damage. Is that right?
no, 7 it looks
7.
like. The other Nakamiba came in this turn.
Right.
So it's possible that Lachlan could be flashing back that Faithless Looting in his graveyard after combat, as he does have exactly 3 mana, but those effects are very, very valuable to him. And it could be that he's just happy to sit back and wait and see what defenses Rory presents before... No, it seems he's definitely going for it now.
Okay.
Dredge fast and die young is definitely the motto for the Dredge player and then the opponent.
Okay. Yeah, so dredging does just represent a huge amount of card selection.
Yeah, the Dredge deck is unique amongst strategies in Magic in that the graveyard is both more important than the hand and about as easy to manipulate and use resources from as the hand is in a normal strategy.
Okay, so it's a pretty big board. So if Rory is able to bounce all these creatures, how much of a setback is this actually for Lachlan?
A pretty major one. Especially if Rory's able to do it inside Lockie's turn, he represents a very, very large chunk of time relative to the speed of these 2 decks. A whole extra turn is massive for the amount of things that happen in every turn. Obviously, this is only turn 4. And from looking at this board state, a lot of complicated things have happened.
Yeah.
Neither of these players are giving the other much in the way of time to... And it looks like Rory has now activated his Pyromancer's Ascension.
Okay.
So from now on, every spell is getting doubled.
Okay, of course, again, thinking the guys cares about cast spells.
Yeah, just like Storm, the copies from Pyromancer's Ascension are not going to help for the Awoken Horror.
Okay, so Rory got something here.
It might be that he doesn't. His hand is a little bit clunky. He's got a bunch of rituals, but it's not quite clear if he has the mana to cast them.
Can't see what the dice is on. There we go. Okay. So he has
Alright, so he's got
2 mana available.
He's got 2 mana available to him, which means that he could cast one of the rituals that he has in hand and flip into the Awoken Horror, as well as make 6 mana for his trouble.
Why not?
And of course, since the Finger from the Ice has been in play for quite a few turns now, the Awoken Horror can attack this turn.
Yep. Let's have a quick look at that card again. So, yeah, it's no slouch. It's a 7/8. It's going to hit pretty hard.
Yeah. And it does dominate the otherwise empty board. Because all of those Bloodghasts and Prize Amalgams are back in Lachlan's hand, it isn't trivial for him to rebuild his board state. He is going to need to find a way of discarding them. He does have those Golgari Rave Trolls in his graveyard, so he's going to get a lot of looks at a way of finding a Faithless Looting or a Confligate.
There's the Electromancer.
So with only 1 card in hand, which I believe is a ritual, Rory isn't going to be winning with Storm this turn. Oh no, it's another Pyromancer's Ascension.
Okay.
So Rory is sort of playing off the top of his deck here. He has cleared Lachlan's board and has deployed all of his engine pieces, and now all he needs is some card draw. Alternatively, time, because a 7-8 and a 2-2 are not going to leave Lachlan's life total alone for very long.
Yeah. And
there's
okay.
a Confragate, which
is probably
there's
going
a
to
lot of
point-
damage. Yeah,
Yep.
there's a lot of damage that goes. A bit unclear where it's going at the moment.
Can that not Can that
well,
not target play?
No, it seems that despite pointing at a few of the creatures in play,
Okay.
might have just been some gamesmanship.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay, and so Lachlan gets there.
Yeah, the Dredge strategy proves to be just a hair faster than the Storm deck can meaningfully interact with.
Yeah. So
And-
it gets a bit of everything. It's got card selection, can get powerful threats out early, and has reach as well. So
Yeah, and even in some situations, it can just go bigger.
Yep.
Golgari Grave Troll
Can be
has more text on it than just being Dredge 6. When you cast that creature, you get a +1/+1 counter for every creature in your graveyard. And in the Dredge strategy, that's lots.
Yep.
That's a lots for 5.
Okay. Well, congrats to Lachlan, making it into the semi-finals
Yeah, and
with his Dredge deck. And good work for Rory making his top 8. He did make top 8 at the last Open as well.
so he will be picking up some
So
Paragon points.
Yep. So that's looking good for Rory as well. So
Making a strong case for an inclusion.
yeah, based on his points. Yep.
Yeah.
So good work. So we'll be back soon with our semi-finals. And once again, congratulations to Lachlan. Okay, stay tuned.